you can contact him.
Yeah, definitely. Put me in touch. Send me his information or send him my information.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Thank you. Okay, I think we're more or less on the time.
Yeah, we usually wait like 2 minutes or something for people to join. Do you have slides to share?
No, yeah, of course I do have slides. Should I?
Yeah, just share them, then we have them up and people see them in the right place.
Yeah, we did a little test already. Oh, it's not moving. Okay. Can you see them properly, the slides?
Yes, I can.
Good. So I see my co-author Francisco Barba is also joining. So the usual caveat apply. All difficult questions goes to him. So that's very good. Hola.
Hola.
Hey, Francisco.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, shall we get started?
Sure.
So, good morning, everyone from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and welcome to our next installment of the seminar series at the East Asia Pacific Chief Economist Office, Kuala Lumpur branch. It's my pleasure that today we have my dear friend Dany Jaimovich with us. Dany is from University of Talca in Chile, from where he's joining us now virtually. And he will be presenting a paper I enjoyed very much reading on ethnic diversity and foreign commons in Africa. So before we dive straight in, please, the usual, just a run-on of the usual rules we have here, the housekeeping. Dany will be speaking straight for about 40 minutes. If you have any immediate questions you need for the understanding of the paper, please let me know through the chat. Don't use a hand raise tool, please use the chat. Let me know and I can interrupt Dany and just ask your question. For all other questions, please wait until the end of this talk. Okay, then without much further ado, Dany, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Tobias and Shafat and everyone for the invitation. Yeah, I'll be happy to take questions during the presentation. So yeah, just please go ahead through Tobias or whatever way you want it. So yeah, I'm happy to present this paper with this joint work with Francisco Barba that is also joining. He's at IFPRI now in DC. And this is a paper we've been working for a while. Actually, Francisco was my student in Frankfurt years ago. And so that was his master thesis. And then we kept working on this project. and actually, before going to the paper itself, I want to tell you just a couple of minutes of what I call the Gambia project, or sometimes the Gambia Networks project, which is quite a long project that I have been working on with several co-authors. And actually, I think this is going to be the last paper on this Gambian saga. This is the 6th or 7th paper, but who knows? Maybe there will be more to come. So I would just tell you a little bit, because it's, I think, important to get to know how is that we are writing this paper, and also about this project. So I started this project in 2008 when I was still a PhD student. And I started, actually, as usually PhD students do, studying an impact evaluation, actually, of a World project of a CDDP, Community-Driven Development Program, in the Gambia, that we study, that was starting in 2008. And when I was studying my PhD, I studied in the Graduate Institute in Geneva, and I was a second year. They say, okay, you want to go to Gambia to evaluate this program? Yes, for sure. And apart from what was the traditional impact evaluation, household surveys and all this stuff, we did something that at a time was quite novel. Now it's not novel anymore, but at a time was quite novel, that we wanted to study the impact of that project on the economic interaction, the networks of interactions in Gambian villages. So we kind of created a measure of how to measure, I call it tribal economics, or the traditional exchanges within Gambian villages. That was quite a long project, and successfully we recently published as the Restart. And we studied the effect of this program, which it was nationwide, and it was an RCT on economic networks. That was quite novel, and I think that's why it got published quite nicely. But one of the things that got my interested, I mean, I'm from Chile, but when I went to Africa, Gambia, of course, is kind of a different world. It's really much more tribal than here in Chile, though I'm studying the indigenous group here, but really over there is a different story. And what called my attention in all this fieldwork was all the ethnic diversity and the ethnic interactions. And what I realized reading the typical literature that I'll be commenting now as well is that I could see that there were a lot of ethnic groups within villages and in different villages, but I didn't see, at least in my observation, that the different ethnic groups had less interaction. So we studied this topic with Jean-Louis Arcana, and actually we published a paper showing that, at least suggestively, there seems to be no less interactions with ethnic diversity. But also in the field, I learned how important was forest preservation in the Gambia, and how important was somehow Gambia for the African ecosystem, because it was kind of the frontier of the desertification, of the Sahara going south to the savannah. So Gambia, Senegal, and all this Sahel region was at the forefront of kind of fighting desertification. So actually, we also had a paper studying the effect of this CDDP program on deforestation, and I have bad news for you guys because that was a World program, and what we found, it was like, of course, it was an unintended effect, that deforestation rate increased in the villages that got the project. So that was a paper that's also relatively recently published at JD. And that actually kind of drives us to the paper I'll be presenting today, which joined these two stories. So we have the story of ethnic diversity and these traditional economic interactions that we found against some of more classical literature, that there were there was not a decrease in the economic interactions between different ethnic groups. And then we come to this question of if this interaction of these ethnic groups, there has some effect on deforestation. And this is what will be presenting today. No, so let me tell you a little bit of the literature of ethnic diversity and deforestation. Let me tell you first that there is not much more specifically in that topic. A little bit of some recent literature, but not so much. Though there is, of course, and I guess most of you are familiar with the large literature on the effect of ethnic diversity on social and economic outcomes, Easterly and Levine, and many other studies not showing that ethnic diversity has a negative impact on economic outcome. Africa growth tragedy, call it Easterly, as Tobias supervisor, no? And since then, and even before, no, we usually think of ethnic diversity as a bad thing, no? In terms of, for example, reducing the provision of public goods, a lot of literature on that, experimental observational literature, and also make it difficult for ethnically distant or ethnically diverse societies to manage governing the commons. So these two things will suggest that if we think of the effect of ethnic diversity on environmental outcomes, forest in this case, probably would be bad. No, there will be more forest degradation. The more diverse, the more ethnically distant are societies. Nevertheless, some more recent studies actually show that not everywhere and not in every situation ethnic diversity have negative effect. Actually, sometimes it could have some positive effect, of course, of diversity and stuff like that. But even particularly some positive effects on the provision of public goods. No? There are some more recent paper on that. Basically, since you are uncertain if the guy next to you from a different ethnic group will provide a public good, then you will provide it by yourself. So it could be some positive effect. So taking this more recent literature, we don't really know from theory what should be the effect of ethnic diversity on forest degradation. It's an empirical question. And actually, there are a little bit few papers. I was a bit surprised when Francisco wanted to start his thesis. I thought there would be a lot of literature on that because I knew the literature on ethnic diversity and the deforestation, but there was relatively little. One exception, very notable exception, it was one of the last papers that Alberto Alesina and some students actually finished before he passed away, that actually was studying the effect of ethnically diverse communities in Indonesia. And they showed that there is a typical natural experiment of Indonesia dividing in I don't know, creating twice as many districts as they had before. In the new district, where the district had more ethnic diversity, they were less effective in controlling lodging companies, and they showed that this leads to more deforestation. No, so that's probably the most relevant paper, and basically goes to this idea of more ethnic diversity, worse economic outcomes, in this case also worse environmental outcomes. So what do? We take this unique case of the Gambia to analyze ethnic diversity and deforestation. Why is unique? I'll show you later, but it's a bit special. I learned. I was the first African country I went, then I went to a lot of others, and I realized it's special in the sense that it's a very small country, but with a lot of ethnic diversity. And what's make it unique is that there is a lot of ethnic diversity within districts and within villages as well. No, so there is a lot of variation in a very small geographical area. There is a lot of variation. In other African countries, you have like, this is the district of the ethnic group A, and this is the district of ethnic group B. Here you have a lot of more diversity. I don't have much time, but I'll tell you later that this is for some historical reasons. So we have data for almost all the Gambian villages, the rural villages, a bit more than 1,600. And what do we do? First, we do something similar to Alesina, some other papers that basically study what are the effect of within village ELF, no, this is the typical measure, ethno-linguistic fractionalization. On deforestation, that's the first thing we do. So we take one village, we see how diverse is that village, and then we see if they have worse environmental outcomes. They have more deforestation, less forest cover, etc. And then I'm just summarizing the results. I'll go much more in detail later, of course. But then we find basically similar results than we would expect and similar than Alesina. So basically we find the larger the ELF, the more ethnically diverse the village, the more deforestation. No? So that's more or less going to what the literature expects. But then we do something different, something that at least to our knowledge, was never done before in the literature. That was basically study not only within villages, but between villages. No? So we take a pair of villages, so we're gonna call it this dyadic approach, because we take different pairs of villages, and then we measure how ethnically distant are these villages. I'll show you, have some like 4 measures of ethnic distance between these villages, and then we ask what is the impact on forests of the fact that these 2 villages are different? What is the impact in the forest they share? No, in the joint forest. So to do this, at least we have okay. Even if you don't believe any of the results I'll show you, we at least introduce an innovation, a methodological innovation. Because we kind of define geographically what are the share areas of 2 villages in a full space, geographical space. No? So that's basically introducing what we call dyadic polygons, which is an object that in mathematics exists. It's called second-order Voronoi polygons, but basically we can construct with geocoded data the share area of two villages, no, that like the exclusive share areas between 2 villages. I'll show you later what it is. But that's an innovation, and actually Francisco did an ArcGIS tool for this, so that was not implemented before. And then what we do is we apply some dyadic regressions. Some of you may be familiar with this kind of regressions to test the effect of ethnic distance on deforestation. And what we find, which was actually a bit of a surprise for us, at least at the beginning, is a bit opposite to what we would expect. So we actually find that when villages are more ethnically distant, there is less deforestation and there is more forest cover in the shared area they have. And then we ask why, and then I will tell you later. We have some hypotheses and we do some suggestive testing, but the result seems to be quite strong. So, okay, that was the introduction, but that's the outline. But don't worry, I will not take too long on this. So I will tell you a little bit more of the setting of the study of Gambia. And why Gambia is a good laboratory, let's say, to study this issue. Very briefly, I would tell you about the data. If you have more questions, I can let you more later. The methods, and especially these dyadic polygons that we are introducing, why is that it was necessary, let's say, to have this new object. And then going to our empirical strategy main results, and both. So I will just show you first at the village level, so how it's like ethnic diversity within a village affects the deforestation in the area around this village, and then this dyadic level, no, when we have 2 villages, pairs of villages, no, and what is deforestation in the area shared by these 2 villages, and what is the effect of ethnic distance on that. Good. Any questions so far?
I have a question. So when you say,
Please.
2 questions actually. So in the literature review, I'm not very well aware of the literature, but I want to ask does it matter what type of resource you were talking about. So could a lake be different than a forest in the sense that you can maybe realize that you're overfishing sooner than you realize you're deforesting forest or you're harming the forest or ecosystem? And the second one is about diversity itself. So the ethnic shouldn't the scale matter? So I was a little maybe I've missed it, but doesn't matter how much diversity there is relative to the total population, right? It must that's how is that? And then I'm asking this because this may differ across countries. So for the Indonesia example that you see, so even even the density of population could be one of the other factors that could matter. So how is that different in this case, and could this be one factor behind different results?
Good. Yeah, the first question, the literature is more, Ostrom and other people have some more descriptive evidence of the management of the commons. And what Ostrom says, no, her theory is like local communities, they can learn how to deal with commons and they don't need to privatize, no? But she says that basically it's more difficult if you have groups that are too diverse, including ethnically diverse. Now, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure if she describes the different commons have for some commons it's more or less difficult to manage. But what I will show at the end, and maybe that's related to the second question as well, is like some different ethnic groups they specialize in different activities. No, some they are more herders, some are more farmers, and managing commons seems to be more difficult for, let's say, farmers than for herders. No, because I think farmers they want to transform forests into croplands, and even if they're from two different ethnic groups, but they want to farm, it would be easier for them to specialize. But if one is a herder and the other is a farmer, and they want different uses for the land, then it would be more difficult to coordinate. So I'll show some related evidence there. And for the second question, maybe let's bear to till the end. I have some when we show channels, we exactly show that apart from ethnic diversity, it matters diversity in terms of populations, in terms of poverty and things like that. So maybe at the end I go to this one. But yeah, those are quite very good questions. Good. So let me show you a little bit about the setting. No, so Gambia is a very small country. Actually, it's the smallest. I don't know if Equatorial Guinea is smaller, but at least in continental Africa is the smallest of the second smallest. It's basically surrounded by Senegal. But what is interesting, and I was very surprised, but as I say, it was my first African country, but then I realized it was a special thing. It's like within this, I mean, this is very small, no? This is 100 kilometers. So basically here you have 250 kilometers, and this is very narrow, of course, as you can see. It's basically the Gambian River all over, and the two banks. But what you can see is that so each of these polygons is a village, and you see that some villages are very diverse and others are not much diverse, and this is all over the country. You can see the hand here, no? So what I'm showing. Okay, but here I don't know if you can see.
Yes, we
but
can.
Here, great. So this is the urban areas that we don't consider for the study, but in the rest of the country, you see a mosaic of some villages being very diverse or not diverse. Why was that? It was a special thing of the Gambia. I don't have much time to say, but that was something of the 19th century. There was a huge war of the Marabous, which were religious leaders, and the Soninke. And basically what happens, the religious leaders, they have some Quranic schools, and they brought followers from the different ethnic groups to these schools, and then they fought to the Soninke, that was kind of the dominant empire. And then the British say, okay, let's stop this war, and basically the stop movement for years in the Gambia. And all these schools that have people from different ethnic groups became many of the villages that we have now. So it was because of this combination of war and this policy by the British that basically you have a lot of diversity all over the country. Another characteristic, very different to the rest of Africa, is that you don't observe major ethnic conflicts in recent years, and definitely not at the time of the analysis. You have a very bad dictator at the time of the study, but there were no major ethnic conflicts. So I guess some of you may have this in mind. It was relatively, maybe it was a fake peace, but there were no major grievances. Maybe there were grievances, but not conflict within the group in the time of study. And here what you see is the major ethnic groups, and also you see a mosaic. No, the same. Okay, in some places there is a bit concentrated, but generally you have groups, different groups in different places. So you have a lot of dyads where you have the village next door is from a different ethnic group. This is something you really see when you are there in the country. And just a little word on land rights. Of course, in the paper, there is a lot of information on that, but just to say that within villages, it's relatively clear the land rights. Sometimes there are some disputes, but basically the traditional founding families, the alcalo, which is the chief of the village, and the chief of the clans are basically the ones that have the traditional rights. Of course, nothing is written, but they have the traditional rights, and they provide land rights to the different villagers. So that's within the village. And that's the same for the forest, when there is forest around very close to the village. But what is more interesting in this setting, the forest that is within villages is much less clear who is in charge of that. No, so de jure, these forests belong to the government, but de facto, those are kind of managed by the villages with a lot of different agreements that are very unclear. There are some formal institutions, there are some community forest management, but few villages have that like, I don't know, 5 or a bit more than 5% of the villages have some kind of community forest management, and even fewer, they have between villages forest community forest management. Usually it's within a village. So basically the forest between villages, it's unclear who manages, who owns, who has the right to say, okay, you can cut here. They use it a lot for charcoal. So there is a lot of pressure on this forest, and it's unclear how to manage. So this is why I guess it's interesting to study how is like village characteristic influence this management of this joint forest. And very briefly about the data, I can tell you more details later if you have some questions. So we used the Gambian census of 2003, where we have data on the ethnicity of all the inhabitants of the village, and of course other characteristics that we use for the analysis. And basically, okay, we miss some villages, but basically we have a geocoded information for all rural villages. We missed like 100 or something like this, and for which we don't have either information or we don't have the coordinates. But basically we have all villages in the Gambia. And we use the data from Hansen et al. They have this global forest data that is being used quite a lot in recent years to study deforestation. I think it's been used and abused in the sense that this data measures vegetation above 5 meters, but it does not distinguish between native forest and plantation. So for example, in Chile, we cannot use this data to study deforestation because we have a lot of commercial plantation of pines and eucalyptus. So if we see deforestation, we don't know if they are cutting commercial trees or if it was like primary forest. But in the Gambia, this is not really a big deal because there are few plantations. Actually seen very little. There are some mango trees or things like that, but very little plantation. So in Gambia, you can use this data. But in some other countries that use this data, actually, you could not really use it, at least if you want to study environmental deforestation. So what does the data provides? It provides the forest cover in the baseline year, which is 2000, which is more or less at the time of the census, and then provides information for forest loss. We use the period 2001-14. More recent data is available, but I think for the study, that's okay. This, I mean, for me, this is quite fine-grained, so it's 27 times 27 meters per pixel. So in a football field, you have like 7 pixels. But for geographers, they think this is not fine-grained enough. For me, it's super fine-grained. So, and this map here, you could see that forest cover differs. They're more in the south, some patches around, and in the north you can see actually the effect of deforestation. No? The north it has less forest, and all data shows that there's been a lot of deforestation, including Hansen, but also some other data that shows deforestation previously. Okay, only this about data. So I think I have like 10 more minutes to talk. What is it, 10, 15?
Yeah, 10 to 15 minutes.
Good, so that should be enough.
Thank you.
Okay, methods first, maybe answering a bit one of the question of Shafat, how to measure ethnic distance. So, okay, for when we take within village, we take the usual measure in all the paper, which is this ethno-linguistic fractionalization. This S is the share of ethnic group E in village I, basically, So, so that's a common Herfindahl index, to measuring within village fractionalization. But distance between villages was something much less common. So Francisco, for his thesis, studied different measures. Then we discovered some others. And we propose 4 different measures of distance between villages because it's something that is not that much studied. So we take from different literatures and take all these different measures. The first one is very easy to understand, I guess. So it's a dummy that basically takes value 1 if. So we always talk about pairs of villages, So village A and B. So if the dominant, and this is, all these measures are distant. So this one takes value 1 if in village A, the predominant group is, let's say, Mandinka, and in village B is Fula, So they have, the predominant group is different. So that's a binary measure, which of course misses a lot of the action of what's happening, but and we see that the results are not so interesting there, but it's an easy to understand measure. Then we have a measure that we took from study, actually measuring what's happening within neighborhood. A lot of these measures come from studying conflict within neighbors and things like that. So this one is the Dany, this distance index of neighborhood ethnicity, which basically measure kind of the probability that if you go from village A to B, if you're gonna meet a guy from your same ethnic group, something like this. You can interpret this this index. Then this measure is more common, the Bhattacharya coefficient, which basically the overlap in the distribution of the ethnic groups between the villages. So if there is few overlap, the groups are very different, but that's a bit more interesting than the dummy because it takes not only the majority, but the whole distribution. And then this one was actually proposed by a referee. It's not so happy, but of course you need to please referees. and it's the pool ELF of the two villages. So this one actually does not measure distance, but measure kind of the joint diversity. If you take the two villages jointly, if they are more diverse than two villages next to them. So we don't like it that much because it's not really distance, it's more diversity. But okay, it's still some information there, but yeah, that's to make happy referee. I hope referee is not in the audience. But if it is, thank you anyway. Yeah. So and next about methods. Okay, that's, I guess most of you have seen this. This is the typical way you measure area around a village or a city or whatever municipality or something like this. So we have villages are the dots here. So this is village A, village B, village C, and since we want to see deforestation in the area of one village, we take these so-called Thyssen polygons, which is all the pixels, let's say, that are closer to the centroid C to any other centroid. So like this, we build areas, exclusive areas around villages. That's common in the literature, and this is what we do for to study within village deforestation. But here we have this methodological innovation, which is when we study pairs of villages. Here we introduce these dyadic polygons, which are the exclusive shared territories between pair of centroids, of those dots. As I say, that was unexistent in ArcGIS, so Francisco actually coded and made it available for download. So this is a contribution of our study. And then we basically take these dyadic polygons that we can interpret as the area that is closer to the pairs of centroids than to any other. So better to show a picture here. So those are the same villages as before, but now we have, okay, that's an easy example. So we have village A and B, and this polygon here is basically closer to these pairs of centroids than to any other centroid. But here, for example, you have this polygon BC, which is closer to these two centroids, but actually the centroids are not in there. So like this, we have chairs and shared areas between these centroids. And then we will study if the distance between these two villages implies that the polygon around this dyadic polygon has less forest cover or more deforestation if these two are distant. That's basically the setting. I don't know if there are any questions so far. I'll go to the results that are now coming. So I'll go. Okay, so empirical strategy, very straightforward, but with some problems that, as you can already see, and will be clear about this. So that's the first kind of estimation for within village. So that's kind of following Alesina paper and other papers, which is basically studying if forest cover or forest loss, you can say deforestation, increases when the ELF, the ethno-linguistic fractionalization of village I, is higher. So we have quite a lot of village level controls. We have ward fixed effects. A ward is a small area within the district, so it's geographically quite homogeneous. But of course, as you can imagine, there are some possible unobservables there. So this is correlations or partial correlations so far. So what we find, as I already mentioned, we find that in more ethnically diverse villages, there is less forest cover, different specifications. For example, we take all villages, and then in some villages, this is savanna, this is not Congo with a very dense forest. So this is savanna, where in some villages, forest is a couple of trees around. So we kind of divide the sample and we take only villages with high forest where deforestation or forest cover is more meaningful, and we find similar results. No, less forest cover and much more deforestation in villages that are more ethnically diverse. So we're still talking about within villages, no? And these effects are actually quite large. For example, I wrote here some magnitudes because this is not that easy to understand, but let's say one standard deviation of ELF is associated to, depending on the specification, between 5 and 16% increase in forest loss in that period. So it's quite a sizable effect. Of course, these are suggestive results, but are results that are kind of consistent in different specifications and that go more or less in line with the literature proposing that ethnic linguistic fractionalization is bad for economic outcomes. Here, it's also bad for environmental outcomes. This is consistent with Alesina in Indonesia as well. Then we go to the most innovative part of the paper, where we take the result at the dyadic level. So we basically estimate these dyadic regressions proposed by Fabchan and Goubert 2007 in the context of networks, no? When they proposed to study networks within villages. So actually this is very similar to what we do in this Ristad paper in the Gambia. So what we mean by dyadic regressions is that basically all but the dependent variable and all the other variables are for pairs of villages, no, not for individual villages. And one innovation here is that we can put village fixed effect. So even though this is not necessarily a causal effect and some dyadic level endogeneity is still there, we can control for village level unobservables, which is of course control for a big part of the problem, or at least for one part of the problem. So what is this? This is deforestation or forest cover within this dyadic polygon that we created, and then we see if ethnic distance, what is the effect of ethnic distance on this deforestation, and then we control for a lot of dyadic level characteristics plus some village characteristics that you need to introduce at the dyadic way, so you could sums of or difference of the variables. This is specification by Fabchan and Goubert. If you don't know, this is quite a relevant methodological innovation for networks and other things. So I really should take a look. Okay, what are the results here? I know this table could be a bit complicated, but just so this is each coefficient comes from a different regression, no? And these are the four measures of ethnic distance in the pairs of villages, and these are the results for forest cover and forest loss. What is interesting already is that, or at least I think is interesting, is like all these results are positive, except for this couple of coefficients that are basically zeros. So basically, in all specifications, we find that more distant villages, so take majority, no, villages that are with different majority of ethnic groups, there is more forest cover, no? And all the results are negative, all the estimated coefficients are negative, implying that more distant, ethnically distant villages, there is less deforestation, no, less forest loss. And this is actually significant in some specification, especially in specifications with the high forest sample, which is where you would expect to find something, and also for these two measures of distance, which are the measures that a priori we like it more because they're not binary as majority, but they capture the heterogeneity of within villages. But also these are measures of distance and not necessarily heterogeneity. So here is where you see most of the action. So I would think this is probably the most relevant result, or at least the result that was not in the literature before. Okay, so that's the result. So to interpret, the results are actually quite large as well. Again, if we interpret one standard deviation of one of these two coefficients, the Bailachandran index or Dany, you find around 10% reduction in forest loss. And this is even larger if you take the sample with high forest. So it's quite a sizable effect. Okay, now of course the question comes why this is happening. Unfortunately, we don't have the data that we would like to have to test this. So for example, we don't have good data on at least at the level we need for land use. But first, say that this is a bit the opposite that what we would expect or what we thought we were fine here, because following Easterly and all of this literature, we were expecting that, okay, the villages are ethnically diverse, distant, so for the joint forest they have, they cannot coordinate to govern these commons, no, to preserve these forests, and they will fight over resources, they will compete over resources, and there will be less forest. But we find the opposite. But actually, thinking a bit more on this issue, it could be actually what was happening is, like, since they are ethnically distant, they do not coordinate to exploit the forest either. No, if, as I say, no, if there are two Mandinka villages and and both agree that the land should be used for farming, then it's easy to agree on cut the forest and put some cropland. But if you have Fula, which are herders, and you have Mandinka, which are farmers, they will not coordinate on cutting forest because they will have different uses. The Fula will say, no, I want this forest so my goats can eat the leaves, no? So maybe this is what's happening. So we don't have direct evidence to test this, but we do some indirect testing using doing some heterogeneity analysis. So basically what we do is we divide the sample in villages that are diverse not only ethnically but in other characteristics. So for example, what we have here is that the effect is much larger in villages that one is small and the other big, in villages where one is poorer than the other, or in villages that are more geographically distant. No, so it's not only ethnic distance what matters, but other characteristics. So we take this as an indirect effect, indirect evidence that it's maybe these differences that they do not avoid them to coordinate to exploit forests. And here's the result that I was mentioning about Mandinkas and Fulas. So basically Mandinkas, which are farmers, there you see a lot more, the effect is much larger than in the Fula, which are herders, and then you don't really see a difference if they are more or less Fula. So there's something going on there in specific economic activities. Right, so I think I'm more or less in the time, so I don't know if I have a minute just to quickly drop some conclusions. So as I mentioned, we have tested if forest degradation differs both within, which was studied before but not so much, but also between, which was not studied before, ethnically diverse communities. We introduced these dyadic polygons as a measure of the shared area between pairs of villages. And then we find that Within villages, more diversity is detrimental for forest preservation. There is more forest loss, there is less forest cover, but a bit surprisingly, at least at the beginning, when we look between villages, no, at the dyadic level, we see that when villages are more distant, actually there is less forest loss, there is less deforestation, no? But still, and anticipating maybe some of the questions, could be some endogeneity problems here. So this is not necessarily a causal effect. In the dyadic regressions, we control for village fixed effect, but there still could be some unobserved heterogeneity at the dyadic level. So future research should address this problem, and also it would be interesting to see similar studies in other settings. No, though it's not that easy because in Gambia we have this nice laboratory with a lot of diversity in small areas, but it would be interesting to see if this could apply to other settings. Okay, that's all. I hope I did more or less well in time.
Thank you, Dany. Yes, you did. Definitely. Good. Okay, so now we're gonna open questions to the floor. So if you have any questions, either type the questions directly into the chat or just let me know through the chat if you have a question, and then I can call on you and you can ask your question over the phone, over the mic. And so let me open this up. I think I have two questions here. One is a little bit for clarification to see how we really have to imagine this entire setting. And I don't know, maybe you've mentioned it, I missed it, but I mean, what is the typical distance between two villages or between two village centroids? I think that would be interesting, just to get an idea of like how far people really have to move to get into these contested common areas that lie between villages.
Yeah.
And then the other questions I would have is because, I mean, as you say, your results are a little bit puzzling, that you kind of find exactly the contrary than you find at the village level and what you would expect just by most common theory. So I was wondering if maybe, have you looked at violence, or is there like intra-village violence? Is that an issue? That maybe you have kind of, that if you move into these contested areas or these shared areas and you take out too many, and you go there to collect firewoods, or you overexploit them on your village, that this can create violence between villages, just because this lack of coordination between villages would create this violence, which can then be an effective deterrent against forest exploitation.
Yeah, thanks, Tobias. Well, here you see, no, so each of these polygons is a village, and you could see that villages are very close by, no? So this here is 100 kilometers. So basically, I think the average distance between villages is like maximum 1 kilometer or something like this, average, something like that. Some a bit more distance in these areas where it's less populated, but in areas like here, they are very close by. So yeah, it's different between different parts of the country, but they're actually relatively close by. But usually you observe some patches of forest between villages. Now, of course, the more distant they are, the more forest you have, but they're relatively close. So they're really competing for this forest. No, it's not that they are so far that they never will encounter. So I think this is one of the nice things of the setting, because if you have a setting where villages are like, I don't know, 10 kilometers apart, they will never compete for forest. No, here I would say in most of the country they're really probably competing for this joint forest. And in terms of violence, as I mentioned, actually here, no, you don't see much violence between villages. There is few violence. It was this very bad dictator, I would say, from 94 or 6 until very recently. And things were basically peaceful, of course, under very strict control of the government. Between villages, and one of the reasons, this I mentioned in one of the papers, in the paper with Jean-Louis Arcan, that this Yahya Jammeh was the dictator, that he wanted to have not ethnical issues. It was that he was from a minority ethnic group. He was from the Jola, which is this light blue area here, but that they are like 6% of the population. So he was always under pressure from the other groups. And I think before Jammeh, there were a bit of ethnic clashes, but afterwards, actually, when I was there, typical ethnic jokes, let's say, but going to conflict, not really. There was very few conflict around. Maybe in the area close to Casmas in the south, a little bit, but here it was also the area of the president, so there was a lot of army here. So no, I don't think violence is driving these results particularly. In this case, this is why I mentioned, no? Because of course in the African setting is one of the things you have in mind, but in this setting, I don't think it's really driving the results. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then let me open it up to the floor. Does anyone have a question for Dany? If you do, feel free just to ask it straight to the microphone.
Yeah, I don't know, Shafat, if with this heterogeneity analysis is more or less answer your question you have in terms of diversity in other aspects.
Yeah, I know this is interesting. Somewhat related to what I was saying. Yeah.
And I mean, on this table, what I was getting at, I think the result that like at larger distance, what you're saying is that at larger distance between villages, you have higher deforestation, right?
Higher yeah, I mean, the larger the distance, the larger the effect of ethnic distance on deforestation, basically. That's the point. So if they are very close by, the larger the effect of ethnic of ethnic distance. So, for example, if they're, I don't know, very close by, there is no effect. This is what it says here. No, there is no effect of being different because they are very close to. But if they are far away, not far away is never too far away in the Gambia. No, so it's going from, I don't know, to being 500 meters to 1 kilometer or something like that. Then you will have the effect because you are more different, no? Or you are more distance. That's
okay. If they are further away, if the distance is bigger, then if distance is bigger and they are more ethnically different, this reduces deforestation.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Could what you pick up before just be a result of greater distance? Is there a correlation between ethnic distance and physical distance?
We control for all this stuff in the regression. No, I mean this is part of what is XAG. No, so all this stuff are controlled. At least distance is controlled. There could be some unobserved ethnic dyadic level things that are correlated to ethnic distance, but all geographical variables are controlled for, and we control. So, for example, this set, it means we control for populations. No, this is if the joint population is larger or the difference are larger. No, so I know sometimes interpreting these dyadic results is a bit tricky. So, for example, Yeah, so when we have difference in poverty, so what it says here is like, if one village is rich and the other is poor, the effect of ethnic distance is more important. Deforestation is further reduced. So if both are very poor or both are relatively rich, there's not much of the effect, which we interpret, but is indirect. As I say, if they're both poor, they say, okay, we are poor, let's coordinate and do something, let's do some young activity. If one is richer, because probably it does some different activity, it will coordinate less to to see what to do with the forest, and probably the effect of ethnic distance will be larger. So yeah, I know, well, it's not so direct to interpret this these dyadic regressions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, what comes to mind in part is there like an optimal level of deforestation from the point of view of the village, which may be different from the optimal level of deforestation from the society at large, and that maybe at the village level, what you have is that you need this coordination in order not to overexploit the natural resources around the village from the village perspective. But that when you look between villages, you're like at the other side of the optimum, and you would need better coordination to actually move to a higher level of.
I mean, that's a bit of the point, no? Exactly. So that's what we mean here. So exactly, it would be optimal. So it's not necessarily good in economic terms that there is less deforestation. It's probably good for the environment. Actually, when we start thinking of this result, we were thinking on a paper. There is this question if warfare, conflict, increases or diminish deforestation, no? Which is a question I always had in mind. So on the one hand, if there is conflict, you would say, yeah, there is no one taking care of the forest, and they will cut the forest for, I don't know, lodging and stuff, and selling and financing for the rebel groups. But on the other hand, if there are rebel groups, there will be no economic activity and there will be no deforestation. So there is a nice paper in Colombia, for example, showing that when the FARC were controlling the rural areas, I think maybe you know the paper, it's by this guy Vargas and Ferguson, all these guys.
Yeah.
So basically show that when the FARC were controlling the forest areas, there was much less deforestation than after the peace deal, because then all economic activity came and then started deforesting very quickly. So in that, and there is a similar result in where is that? In Sierra Leone, I think, same story, no? That when the rebels were there, no deforestation, then peace agreement, and then peace was bad for forests, they start cutting. So it's a bit of a similar story, no? So if your neighbor is of the same, here is maybe not conflict like with guns, but it's conflict is like if we are from the same ethnic group and we have exactly same of distribution of economic activities, we coordinate to deforest in a way that is beneficial for both of us. But if we are from different ethnic groups, then we will not coordinate to exploit forest, and therefore it's bad for the villages because probably they don't do the economic activities they're supposed to do in the forest, but it's good for the environment. No, that's kind of the story we have. But we cannot really test this now because we will need to have more fine-grained data on land use that we don't really have. We explore a couple of databases, but we don't have. So this is why we have this. But yeah, that's kind of the story we have in mind to explain the results. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then if there are no more questions, okay, let's give you one last shot. Anyone has a question? Just speak straight into the microphone. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thanks, Dany. Before you log off, please fill out this really short survey. It will literally take you 10 seconds. I posted the link into the chat, so please fill it out. It's important to get this feedback from you and also to improve our seminar series.
Okay.
And otherwise, I would like to thank Dany for a great seminar, for a great talk. Very interesting stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing that paper published.
Hopefully, yeah, we are in the second round of the revision, so maybe.
Okay, good. Well, best of luck.
Thank you, thank you. It's always tricky. I hope you will invite me to Kuala Lumpur at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Now that April 1st, the country opened up. If you're fully vaccinated, you can come.
I'm fully, yeah. I'm waiting for my fourth jab, so I have, I guess, with 4 vaccines.
I think 3 is enough. 3 is enough.
Good. I already have 3, so it's a deal.
So you're good to go.
Good, guys. Thanks for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for being here. It was great. So, and to everyone else, have a great day if you're tuning in from East Asia, and have a good night
Yeah,
if you are on the United States East Coast
exactly. We
or
want to
Latin
hear
America or any other place.
Good. Okay,
Okay,
so that's
thank
the
you.
summary. Great. Thanks, Tobias. Bye bye.